I moved into the third-floor apartment of an old brick building 6 years ago and met my neighbor, Mr. Henderson, on the very first day when he stood by his door at exactly 8:00 a.m. to tell me it was a beautiful morning for a fresh start. Every single morning after that for 2,000 days, I would step into the hallway to find him wearing the same beige cardigan and holding the same ceramic mug, while he repeated that exact sentence with a rigid, wide-eyed smile that never reached his ears. I never thought much of it beyond assuming he was a lonely man of habit. So I always smiled back and hurried to my car without ever noticing that his door never fully closed behind him. Last Tuesday, I forgot my phone and ran back upstairs at 8:15 a.m. But the hallway was empty, and when I accidentally bumped his door, it swung open to reveal a completely gutted, dusty room with no furniture or personal belongings. I stepped inside the freezing space and saw a single folding chair positioned directly behind the peephole, with a stack of hundreds of Polaroid photos of me exiting my own door. The air smelled like stale ozone and copper, and as I flipped through the photos, I realized they were time-stamped for every single day of the last 5 years, including days I thought I was alone. I found a logbook on the floor that detailed my sleep schedule, my grocery lists, and the exact brand of detergent I used, written in a hand that looked identical to my own signature. My heart hammered against my ribs as I saw a note pinned to the wall stating that the performance required perfect consistency to ensure my total comfort. I backed out of the room and tripped over a thin wire running along the baseboard that led directly into my own apartment through a tiny drilled hole. I ran into my living room and began ripping apart the molding, only to find a series of high-definition lenses embedded in the wood that were all aimed at my bed. Each camera was wired to a transmitter that was humming softly, indicating that someone was currently watching the feed from a very close distance. I realized the beige cardigan I saw every morning was hanging on a hook inside my own coat closet, still warm to the touch as if it had just been worn. I grabbed a kitchen knife and checked every room, but the apartment appeared empty, even though the scent of Mr. Henderson's peppermint breath was lingering in the air. I looked out the window and saw him standing on the sidewalk, looking up at me with that same frozen smile while he held a remote control. He pressed a button, and I heard my own front door deadbolt click shut from the outside, locking me into the unit with no way to exit. I threw myself against the heavy oak wood, but the door had been reinforced with steel plates that I had never noticed behind the decorative paint. That's when I thought it was over. I had no idea what was about to happen next. The story isn't over. Subscribe the channel to continue. I began screaming for help through the glass, but the windows had been replaced with thick acrylic panels that didn't vibrate or allow a single decibel of sound to reach the street below. Mr. Henderson began to walk back into the building with a slow, rhythmic pace that echoed through the vents, and I realized he had the only set of keys to the new locks he had installed while I was at work. I scrambled to the bathroom to climb through the small ventilation shaft, but when I opened the grate, I found it packed tight with hundreds of used syringes and locks of my own hair collected over the years. The lights in the apartment began to flicker and then died completely, leaving me in a suffocating darkness that smelled of the same peppermint and old wool. I heard the floorboards in the hallway groan under a heavy weight, and then the sound of a key turning slowly in my lock made me retreat into the kitchen corner. The door creaked open, and the silhouette of the man stood there, silhouetted by the hallway light, still holding the ceramic mug, which I now saw was filled with dark, dried blood. He didn't attack me immediately, but instead began to reset the room, moving my furniture by inches to match the diagrams I had seen in his empty apartment. He told me in a flat, monotone voice that I had ruined the routine by coming home early, and that now the cycle had to be reset to the beginning with a much stricter schedule. He pulled a heavy set of iron shackles from his cardigan pocket and bolted them to the floor joists he had exposed under my rug weeks ago. I tried to lung at him with the knife, but he moved with a terrifying, practiced speed and caught my wrist in a grip that snapped the bone instantly. He forced me down onto the floor and began to stitch my lips together with heavy nylon thread so that I could never break the silence of our perfect morning routine again. As the needle pierced my skin, he explained that he had been my father's neighbor 40 years ago and had been waiting for me to grow into the same age my mother was when she disappeared. I saw him pull a photo from his pocket of a woman who looked exactly like me, bound in the same corner of the same room, dated 30 years prior. He leaned down and kissed my forehead, promising that tomorrow at 8:00 a.m. sharp, we would start the fresh start he had always envisioned for us. I looked at the wall and saw a tally of marks hidden behind the wallpaper, numbering in the thousands, representing the women who had occupied this room before me. He turned off the light and left me in the dark, and I realized that no one was coming because the world believed this apartment had been vacant since the 70s. One last question: if you were in her place at that moment, would you have done the same? Be honest. What does her choice deserve out of 10? Subscribe now. The best story is coming next.